Hello and welcome to the next Judaism lesson. Today we are going to be looking at the beliefs and teachings, specifically the nature of God, the beliefs around the Messiah, and the ideas of the sanctity of life. So to start off with today, we need to understand what we're going to do. So by the end of this session, you will hopefully be able to understand the Jewish teachings about God, the Messiah, and the value of life. Use relevant scriptures accurately, so knowing not only what quotations to use, but how to use them accurately within your answers, as well as then practicing a variety of different GCSE exam questions throughout this session as well. To start off with then, we're going to look at the nature of God. And this literally just means the beliefs about his characteristics, what God is like. So within Judaism, they teach that he is one, that there is only one God, into this belief of monotheism, the belief in one God, mono meaning one. You've got the idea that he is omniscient, which means he knows everything. Omnipotent, which means he's all-powerful. He's a lawgiver and a judge, which means that not only did he give the instructions, he will also judge those based on their ability to follow those instructions. So if you live in accordance with those instructions, you will be rewarded. If you do not live in accordance with those instructions, you will be punished. Finally, then, he is also transcendent and immanent, meaning that he is both beyond this world, outside of time and space, but is also physically in it. Now, that can sometimes be quite a tricky thing to get your head around. How can he be both outside of the world and in it at the same time? A really useful sort of way of thinking about this is thinking of like DNA. For example, your parents have their DNA within you. So they are both within you, but also they are external beings from you. So they are outside of you as well. So you've got your parents within you in terms of your DNA, and them being physically outside of you as sort of a separate being. So that's one way you can try to understand how God can both be within the world and outside the world at the same time. So the key quote here that's crucial for Jewish people is this one here from the book of Deuteronomy. This effectively is one of the most important quotations for any Jewish person as part of a very important prayer, which is their declaration of faith, or their Shema. So this idea of Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one, highlights that important belief in one God, sort of pushing forward that idea of monotheism. I'll give you a second to copy this quotation down, and then we'll be moving on in 3, 2, and 1. So if we were to then try and answer a 4-mark question on this, different exam boards have slightly different expectations for those 4-mark questions. I'm going to give the initial generic 4-mark question under the AQA exam board, as I believe it is probably the more simplistic of the other exam boards. I'll also talk you through how you can add in those extra sort of points in to make sure you get those marks as well. The first thing you want to do is you want to give a point. Now, the best way of answering these questions is just giving a keyword. One belief about the nature of God is he is, and then insert a keyword. Your explain then is going to be giving some sort of definition. If you're under the AQA, if you just said one belief about the nature of God is that he is omnipotent, this means that he is all-powerful. That would get you 2 marks. Now, in other exam boards that have 4-mark questions, you might need to add a little bit more detail, just showing you have a little bit further knowledge. This could include using either a quotation or a link to a story within the religion to sort of show that you have that understanding. For those doing the AQA, that is similar then to the 5-mark question, or what has now become the 6-mark question. Well, then you're going to need a second point, because the question asks for explaining 2 beliefs. You've only given 1 so far, so you're just going to repeat with another keyword, and then you're going to repeat again with that explain. Again, obviously adding that extra detail depending on what your exam board requires you to do. For Edexcel, for example, if you have a 4-mark question in there, I know you need to include some sort of quotation or reference to a story, just to show you have a deeper understanding of what that word actually means. Now, the next section we need to look at is the concepts around the Messiah. Now, the Messiah was supposed to be the anointed one, who was going to become the leader of the Jews, who was going to come down to earth to basically fix a lot of their problems. The first thing they believed he was going to do was restore the temple. Now, this, depending on how spiritual your beliefs are within Judaism, is going to differ. Some people believe this is a literal temple that they were going to build as a center place of worship for Jewish people around the world. However, more sort of spiritualist sort of Jews tend to go down the idea that this is more of a metaphorical temple, that this is just a general sort of more spiritual place rather than a physical place. So for those Jewish people, they're going to argue that this is not a literal construction of a temple. This is more of just a spiritual growing of a community of people worshiping towards one thing. They also believed that he was going to bring peace upon the world. Now, this is obviously, at the moment, we're seeing a lot of conflict in the world. For the Jewish people, they believed that if the Messiah was to come down, that all conflicts would stop. Everybody would be at harmony with each other. Now, many people believed that this is why Jesus wasn't the Messiah, because he didn't go against the people who were causing pain and suffering, which the Jewish people at the time believed to be the Romans. Therefore, he wasn't bringing the peace and therefore wasn't actually Messiah. They believed that this person was going to rebuild Israel as a center place of the promised land, which is this place that God had promised in his covenant to Abraham. They were going to have this place which was going to be for them to grow their civilization, provide them with everything they could possibly need. The Messiah would rebuild Israel to be exactly what God promised them to have in that covenant. So when they say they're going to rebuild Israel, it's going to become that promised land to fulfill that covenant. It's also going to rule with justice, meaning that any wrongs that have happened throughout time will be made right. So anything that has been wrong in the world that has happened will be corrected to make sure that anything that could possibly go wrong doesn't. Everything is going to be ruled with justice. Now, Orthodox Jews believe that this is going to be a literal person to come down to earth and actually put all of this stuff into place. This is because they tend to follow more of the literal standings of the Torah. Whereas Reform Jews, they often see this as more of a symbolic idea, that one day maybe the world itself will become more sort of messianic in itself, in that everybody will just suddenly get along and there will be restored peace and everybody will be able to focus upon one true sort of entity of God. So there would be this time where everybody would naturally come to that point within themselves spiritually. This is a little less of a literal idea of a Messiah rather than a time where everybody acts as if they are the Messiah, bringing about peace, living a life of justice, bringing together the community of the Jewish people. Now, a key quotation that links to the idea of the Messiah then is that this idea from the book of Isaiah, suggesting that you're not going to need to be at war anymore. They're not going to have to fight with anyone else. Why is that going to link to the Messiah then? What was it that the Jewish people believed the Messiah was coming to do? I'm going to let you pause the video here and we're going to discuss what was it that Messiah was going to do and how did that link then to this quotation. I'm going to ask you to give the answers then in 3, 2, 1. Hopefully you could have said something along the lines of the idea that it was going to bring peace and rule with justice, meaning that warring conflict was no longer going to need to be a thing. Hopefully something along those lines would have given you marks if this was a sort of explanation or a point linking to a quotation in an answer that requires it. That would be able to get you that sort of connection in there. And finally, then we need to come on to looking at the sanctity of life. Now, this is a crucial belief within Judaism. We believe that all life is sacred because it's been created by God. So this means that all human life has to be protected. However, sometimes this means that saving life can override other Jewish laws. I'll have a talk about an example in just a minute. Only God can give or take life, meaning that we cannot do things such as killing other people or prolonging people's life who are supposed to die. This can cause a little bit of an ethical issue, which we'll talk about in a second. Now, some quotations you may wish to use here are these ones here. Do not murder, this idea from the 10 Commandments given to Moses in the book of Exodus. It shows clearly that we aren't allowed to kill anyone, which links to this idea of only God can give life and that all human life should be protected, even if that means protecting the life of your enemy. And then secondly, we have this quotation here that whoever saves a life, it's as if they've saved the entire world. This is because when saving one life, you are protecting something that has been created by God. Now that shows that everything then is important because everything is created by God. Now the reason I said this could link into a sort of more of an ethical issue is this idea of an abortion. Some Jewish people could argue, therefore, that abortion might be allowed if the mother's life is at risk, because you have to protect the life that is currently in existence, which means that other things, like organ donation, for example, can be seen as a good thing. If you decide to give up your life and give up your body, and you give up your organs through donation once you have passed, you're no longer whole, which for some Jewish people is a problem. However, if it means prolonging someone else's life or giving life and protecting someone else who has been injured in an incident that wasn't their fault, that can be seen as a really, really good thing. Now, very quickly, what I would like you to do is see who believes what. Do you think this is an orthodox belief, a reform belief, or do you think this is a belief that belongs to both? Have a look at the three statements here and then have a go filling in this little box for me. I'm going to give you the answers in 3, 2, and 1. Hopefully you had something looking like this. First statement, the Messiah will be a real person, is only believed as an Orthodox Jew. Life is sacred because it comes from God is something that both Reform and Orthodox Jews believe, as well as one day the world will be at peace. Now, Orthodox believe this will happen because the physical Messiah will be the one to make that happen. However, the Reform belief is that one day the world generally will become messianic in their sort of spirituality, and that will bring peace upon the world. Finally, then, we need to have a look at this 12-mark question. Now, this might be a 15-mark question, depending on the exam board. I could look at it as a 12-marker because that's what the majority of exam boards use. Now, this needs to have arguments for and against the statement. On mark exams, one of the most common things that I see is people using, let's say for this question, arguments for the sanctity of life, and then thinking that the arguments against it just means saying why those arguments are wrong. If you don't offer a more important belief, you're not giving arguments for and against. You might be showing the strengths and weaknesses of an argument. However, you're only doing half of the job. You need to do both one idea against a separate idea to get the full marks. You need to use sources of wisdom and Jewish teaching, meaning you need to actually use some sort of story or quotation or reference to deeper knowledge. If you don't do that, again, you cannot get past the half marks, as well as then reaching a justified conclusion. Just stating what you have said previously in your answer is not a justified conclusion. You need to make sure you're saying this specific idea is the strongest argument, and I believe this is the case because. It's all well and good showing understanding of both sides of the argument, but if you do not reach an overall conclusion saying this is the strongest argument, then this will not be seen as justified. This will just be seen as a general conclusion that can be made. Now, a really simple way of doing this and answering this question is trying to make sure that you have really strong core beliefs to talk about to make sure that your arguments are as strong as they possibly can be, because these tend to be more convincing and more easier to fall in line with. Now, some ideas that I got for you here is, well, in the agree side, the sanctity of life, you've got the idea of do not murder. Now, this belongs to the 10 Commandments, which is the 10 foundational rules that Jewish people will live their lives by, showing how important it is to believe in the idea of protecting everyone and therefore the sanctity of life. Having that foundational belief there makes it a really convincing argument. As well as this idea of then actually the sanctity of life in itself requires you to protect God's creation. You then again have this quotation here. It's like if you saved the entire world, showing how doing one small thing can have such a huge impact, showing its importance. On the other side, though, you've got this belief in Messiah, which could be the most important Jewish belief because it's going to be the fulfillment of the promise that God gave to the Jewish people, the fulfillment of the promised land, the fulfillment of the Messiah, that this person will come, as well as then this foundational belief of how you become sort of Jewish is you need to recite this prayer, this Shema, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, this belief in one God. If you do not believe in that, how can you be Jewish? Now you can see here that all of these arguments are really compelling, meaning that when it comes to the conclusion, it doesn't matter which side you agree or disagree with. You can say there are strengths and weaknesses to both sides. Now, when it comes to writing the conclusion, what sometimes can be the case is some people will try to then write an answer supporting one idea, and then their conclusions support the complete opposite idea that they said was weak in the first place. Your conclusion, if you want to get those high marks, you need to make sure your conclusion actually follows with the rest of your answer. It has to follow a logical chain to reach that highest mark possible. Now, I hope this has been helpful for you guys. Next time we'll be looking at some of the most important people within Judaism, some of the stories behind them and why they are seen as such important people within Judaism. Thank you very much, guys, and I will see you in the next one.